There's a system that generates electricity from your roof. It doesn't need solar panels or batteries. It doesn't require permits or contracts with anyone. It costs $2 in hardware store materials. It was discovered more than 200 years ago. Power companies buried it before you were born. They didn't bury it because it failed. They buried it because it worked too well. Electricity you can't measure, you can't charge for, and what isn't charged cannot sustain a $400 billion a year industry. This is the story of the generator that fits in your pocket. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If these stories matter to you, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here we open the safes that the industry locked shut. In 1821, a physicist named Thomas Seebeck had 2 strips of metal in his laboratory. One strip was shiny copper, the other was dark gray bismuth. He joined them at the ends, forming a closed circuit. Then he heated one of the ends with the palm of his hand. The needle of a compass next to it began to move. He froze, staring at that needle. He had generated an electromagnetic field with the heat of his hand. No fuel, no spark, no chemical reaction, just 2 different metals and a temperature difference. He published his results that same year. Scientists all across Europe replicated the experiment in their laboratories. All of them obtained the same result. The effect was named after him, the Seebeck effect. 2 different metals plus differential heat equals electricity. That simple, that powerful. 80 years later, in 1902, engineers understood the real scale of the discovery. Wilhelm H. Hallwachs documented that metal roofs exposed to the sun generated constant temperature differences. A zinc roof at noon can reach 70 degrees Celsius. That same roof at 3 in the morning drops to 10 degrees, a difference of 60 degrees every single day without doing anything. Wax connected strips of copper and galvanized iron to that metal roof. The system generated continuous electric current for 12 hours. No human intervention, no fuel, no cost. Farms in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland began using homemade versions of the system. Farmers without access to the power grid built thermogenerators with copper and iron from hardware stores. The most basic system cost the modern equivalent of dollars. This is where the story gets strange. In 1923, major power companies began their massive expansion. They laid cables across all of Europe and North America in less than 15 years. With the cables came signed contracts and meters installed on every wall. There also came the idea that generating your own electricity at home was dangerous. It wasn't an accident. It was a documented industrial public relations campaign. Homemade thermogenerators disappeared from applied physics manuals. They disappeared from hardware store catalogs and electrical workshops. They disappeared completely from public conversation. But the Seebeck effect did not disappear. The laws of thermodynamics cannot be patented or bought. They can only make you forget they exist. I gathered everything I found about this system in one place. The exact materials, the measurements, and the metals that work best. The most common mistakes when building thermoelectric cells and how to avoid them. Everything is in the complete Forbidden Camping package. Step-by-step homemade thermogenerators using local hardware store materials. A map of metal combinations with the highest voltage differential. Methods to maximize the thermal difference between a hot roof and the night sky. Energy storage systems without lithium batteries. More than 10 guides in one place. No fluff, straight to the point. The link is in the description, but stay here. The video has just begun. Now the numbers, because numbers are impossible to ignore. A copper and iron cell with a 30-degree difference generates between 0.2 and 0.7 volts. That seems small with a single metal cell. Connect 20 cells in series and you get between 4 and 14 volts, enough to charge a phone directly from the roof. Enough to power emergency LED lighting throughout the night. A researcher from the University of Freiburg documented this in 2017. An array of thermoelectric cells with a 50-degree difference can generate up to 120 watts per square meter, without photovoltaic panels, without $10,000 inverters installed on the roof. The difference between your roof at noon and that same roof at dawn easily exceeds 25 degrees. This happens in almost any climate zone on the planet, 365 days a year. If you made it this far, you'd know more about independent energy than 99% of people. Subscribe and share with someone who needs to remember what we were made to forget. Everything the industry buried is in the complete package. The link is in the description. Now stay with me. What comes next is the part no one wants you to hear. So why isn't this everywhere? Because no electrician has ever mentioned it to you. The global electrical industry generates $400 billion a year just from distribution and residential electricity billing. The model is simple. They generate, you consume, they charge you every month. For that model to work, you must depend on them completely. You can't have an alternative. You can't have an independent plan. The Seebeck effect is exactly that, an option that doesn't need their permission. You can't patent the laws of physics. You can't create dependency when someone generates electricity from their own roof. You can't charge a meter to someone who doesn't need the grid. The entire economic model of electricity distribution depends on your ignorance, and that's why homemade thermogenerators had to disappear from the books. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were too independent. The solar panel industry doesn't want you to know either. That market moves $150 billion a year and grows at double digits. A basic home solar panel system costs between $3,000 and $8,000 installed. A homemade copper and iron thermogenerator costs dollars in hardware store materials. One cannot be sold, the other can. One creates dependence on certified installers, the other does not. One requires inverters, regulators, and factory warranties. The other only needs two metals and heat. This is the part that should make you angry. The technology always existed. The knowledge was always available. You were simply taught to look the other way. Now I'm going to show you exactly how to build it. You need 14-gauge copper wire, the same kind sold in any hardware store. You need 16-gauge galvanized iron wire. You need electrical tape and a basic multimeter to measure voltage. The total cost of materials does not exceed $3 at any local hardware store. First step, cut 1 meter of copper wire and 1 meter of galvanized iron wire. Second step, twist both wires together at one end, forming the hot junction. That junction goes to the hottest point on your roof, on the metal surface exposed to the sun. Third step, separate the opposite ends and connect them to the multimeter. That separated end is the cold junction, which should remain in the shade or exposed to open air. Fourth step, measure the voltage between the two ends with the multimeter in DC mode. With a 30-degree difference between the two junctions, you will see between 0.2 and 0.5 volts. That is the CEC effect working on your roof in real time. To increase power, build more pairs and connect them in series. Each additional pair adds voltage to the total system on the roof. With 20 pairs connected in series, you have enough voltage to charge a portable battery bank. A camper in Oaxaca built a system of 30 pairs in his off-grid cabin. He used it for 2 years to power LED lighting and charge his emergency radio. The total cost of his setup was $9 in hardware store materials from his town. $9. 2 years of independent electricity. No contract, no meter, no bill. The difference between that camper and 98% of people is simple. He knew that physics has no price. He knew that the heat of the sun on a zinc roof is real energy that no one can charge him for. And he knew that building your own energy source is not a technical act. It is an act of independence. This knowledge did not die. It was waiting for someone to open the safe and bring it back into the light. If this video changed how you see the roof of your house, subscribe and share it. Every time this video is shared, the industry loses a captive customer. Every homemade copper and iron installation is a bill that never arrives at the end of the month. This is not a tutorial, it is resistance. The next safe opens soon, and what's inside is even heavier. Yeah,